I guess I should start by saying that I never thought I'd be writing this. My name is Brad, and I'm a 34-year-old guy living in the suburbs. Like most people, I thought my life was fairly typical. I met my wife, Jess, when we were both in college. She was in my English class, and I was smitten from day one. We've been married for 6 years now, and at first everything seemed perfect. Jess was lively, full of dreams, and always had that spark. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. I've always been a hard worker. I put in long hours because I wanted to provide a good life for Jess. She always complained that I worked too much, but she loved the money that came with it. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I felt this growing chasm between us. Jess started to become more distant. She'd roll her eyes when I talked about my day, or cut me off mid-sentence with some complaint about my absence. I would come home after a long day, ready to share my experiences, only to be met with her scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. There were little signs that something was off. She started going out a lot more without telling me where she was going. At first, I brushed it off as her needing time with friends, but it started to feel like she was hiding something. One night I came home late from a work trip and she wasn't there. Her car was gone, and I felt this weird knot in my stomach. I texted her, hoping she'd answer quickly, but she took her time responding with a vague "out with friends." I don't know why, but I felt a sudden chill wash over me. Then came the day that everything changed. I had taken a few days off for some much-needed rest and decided to surprise Jess by cleaning the house. I opened her laptop, wanting to check our calendar for the week, when I stumbled upon a series of emails. I thought they were old, but the timestamps showed they were recent. Instantly, everything in me fell silent. The familiar knot twisted tighter in my stomach. The emails were flirty, full of inside jokes and playful banter, spelled out in a way I hadn't seen in our relationship for a long time. It took me a moment to process it, but they were clearly not from any friend. They were from a guy named Kyle. I didn't know who he was, but it didn't take much effort to figure out he was someone close to her. I felt sick. I sat there on the couch, her laptop open in front of me, reading through what felt like a betrayal script. My heart raced as I read her words, sweeter and more affectionate than anything I had received in months. It was like getting punched in the gut. I was filled with rage and sadness at the same time. How could she do this to me? Didn't she understand what we had built together? After I read the emails, I decided to confront her the moment she got home. I couldn't just sit there and pretend everything was okay. No more ignoring it. I was tired of feeling like an outsider in my own life. When Jess finally walked through the door, I was still shaking from the adrenaline, but I knew I had to stay calm. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. "Hey, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice low but firm, trying to gather my composure. She looked at me, confusion crossing her face, and then she shrugged. "Sure, what's up?" I didn't waste any time. I opened her laptop and turned it towards her, pointing at the screen. "Who the hell is Kyle?" Her face went pale, and for a split second I saw genuine fear in her eyes, but then it turned into anger. "Brad, this is ridiculous. You're snooping through my things." "Don't deflect, Jess. I'm asking you a question." My heart was pounding. The truth was hanging in the air, and I could feel the weight of it. She hesitated, glancing down at the screen before looking back at me, trying to muster a defensive tone. "It's nothing, just some harmless flirting. You know how it is with friends." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Harmless. I felt my blood boil. Harmless. Jess, this is way more than that. That's when the floodgates opened. I could see her scrambling for excuses, trying to downplay what was clearly a painful betrayal. "We were just having fun. It didn't mean anything. You know how lonely it can get with you working all the time." As I stood there, feeling like I was drowning in betrayal, I had to confront the reality of our relationship. I loved her, but love wasn't enough when it felt like she had already tossed our marriage aside for some fleeting excitement. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a complete fracture in the foundation we built together. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew I was going to have to make some decisions. As I watched her try to justify her actions, I could feel the gears in my mind turning. There had to be a way to make this right for me, a way to reclaim the power that had been stripped from me. I just had to figure out how to do that. After that confrontation, things spiraled pretty quickly. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. Jess tried to insist that nothing serious was happening between her and Kyle, but the more she spoke, the more hollow her excuses sounded. It was as if each word dug a deeper hole in my heart. I was angry, yes, but I also felt this strange numbness creeping in. It was like I was looking at her through a glass wall and she was a stranger on the other side. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over. My mind was swimming with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and confusion. I kept asking myself how I could have missed the signs. I thought I knew my wife. We had shared our lives, dreams, and futures together, but now I felt like I was in a fog. The world outside felt surreal, and I was caught in this whirlwind of emotions, trying to make sense of it all. The next day, I went to work but couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to Jess and her betrayal. It was infuriating to sit in meetings and pretend everything was fine while my life was falling apart. I felt like I was on the edge of something, a breaking point. Eventually, I made the decision to take a leave of absence. I needed time to think, to process everything that had happened and figure out my next steps. Jess, on the other hand, seemed desperate to patch things up. She would text me, call me, trying to get me to talk, but I was still so hurt that I couldn't even look at her. When I did, all I could see were the lies and the deceit. One night she came home early and I could see her trying to act normal, but the tension in the air was palpable. She approached me cautiously as if I were a wild animal ready to bite. "Brad," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "Can we talk? I miss us." I ran my hand through my hair, trying to contain the storm brewing inside me. "Miss us? How can you say that after everything? You've been cheating on me. What is there to talk about?" Her eyes glistened with tears. "I messed up. I know I did. I was feeling neglected and Kyle was just someone to talk to. I didn't mean for it to go this far." The pity party wasn't going to work on me. I felt a deep anger rise up again. "You think that justifies what you did? You don't just accidentally flirt with someone. You chose this, you picked him over us." "I didn't mean to hurt you, I just wanted to feel wanted again," she cried. And there it was, the justification, the blame game. I realized I was at a crossroads. I could either let her manipulate my feelings or take control of the situation. I decided to take a step back. I needed clarity and I needed to think. After a few days of silence, I realized that I was done playing the victim. I didn't want to spend my life in this emotional turmoil. I felt like I was losing a piece of myself trying to hold onto a relationship that was built on broken trust. I began making plans, not just for myself, but also for how I would approach this situation head-on. I started gathering evidence. I knew it might sound petty, but I wanted to catch Jess in her lies. I needed proof to solidify my resolve. I went through her social media, and it didn't take long to find more incriminating messages between her and Kyle. The way she spoke to him was sickening. It was intimate, filled with endearments that I hadn't heard in years. One night, I went out with some friends to get my mind off things. They noticed I was off and pressed me to share what was wrong. I hesitated, but I knew I needed to talk about it. I told them about Jess and Kyle and how I felt completely blindsided. The anger and hurt poured out of me as I recounted everything. My friends were sympathetic, offering support and advice, but deep down, I knew I had to be the one to make the final call. A few days later, I decided it was time for another confrontation. Jess had been trying to act like nothing had happened, but I needed to lay down the law. I set a time for us to sit down, and when she walked into the room, I could see the hopeful glimmer in her eyes. "Brad, I'm so glad you want to talk. I've been thinking a lot about us," she began. "Yeah, I have too," I interrupted, my voice steady. "And I think we need to be honest with ourselves. This isn't working anymore. You've broken my trust in a way that I can't overlook. You've made your choices, and now I make mine. I want a divorce." Her hopeful expression turned to shock. "Wait, what? You can't be serious. We can work this out." "No, Jess, you've made your bed. This has gone too far. I deserve better than this." The emotion that passed over her face was a mix of disbelief and desperation. "You don't mean that. We had so many good times together. Please don't throw this away." I held firm, feeling a mixture of resolve and sadness. "You chose to throw this away when you chose to betray me. I'm done." And just like that, the reality of our situation set in. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was heartbroken, but I was also relieved to finally take a stand. I realized that this would be a long road ahead, but I knew I had to stick to my decision. I spent the next few days figuring out the logistics of the divorce. I called a lawyer, started going through our finances, and mentally prepared myself for the aftermath of our decision. The emotional weight was heavy, but I felt like I was reclaiming my life. It was time for me to focus on healing and finding out who I was without her. The devastation in my heart was still there, but it was no longer the only thing defining me. I was ready to take control of my future, no matter how hard it would be. It was time to move forward, and I was determined to do just that. The days that followed my decision to file for divorce were a whirlwind of emotions. I was surprised by how many feelings were packed into every moment. I felt relief, anger, sadness, and even a hint of freedom. I no longer had to carry the weight of Jess's betrayal. It was time to focus on myself, but the process was anything but smooth. I started seeing a therapist to help me navigate my emotions. At first, I wasn't sure if it was going to help, but I knew I needed an outlet to process everything without judgment. Every session was cathartic. I shared everything: my anger, my heartbreak, and my fears about the future. My therapist encouraged me to articulate my feelings and to find healthier ways to cope with the upheaval. One of the hardest parts of going through this was dealing with the aftermath of telling family and friends about the divorce. I decided to be upfront with everyone about what had happened. My parents were shocked but supportive. They had always trusted Jess and welcomed her as a daughter. I could hear the disbelief in their voices as I explained the situation, but they quickly rallied behind me. Friends were similarly supportive, offering to help in any way they could. I didn't realize how many people were invested in my happiness until they rallied around me. I went out more, started going to the gym, and even picked up a few hobbies I had abandoned over the years. I needed to reclaim my identity, and it felt good to get out there and reconnect with life. Throughout this entire process, Jess kept trying to reach out. I received texts filled with apologies and proclamations of love. She claimed she was willing to do anything to fix things. I found it infuriating. Every message felt like a manipulative attempt to reel me back in, and I was determined not to fall for it. Each time I received a message, it reinforced my resolve to move forward. I didn't want the cycle of hurt and deceit to continue. Then came the day I had been dreading. We had to meet to discuss the legal aspects of our divorce. My lawyer suggested we do it in a neutral setting, so we decided to meet at a small coffee shop. I didn't expect it to be a pleasant experience, but I had no idea how intense it would be. When I arrived, Jess was already there, nervously tapping her fingers on the table. She looked different, more vulnerable. Gone were the confident airs she wore like armor. As I sat down across from her, I could see the unease in her eyes. She tried to put on a brave face, but the cracks were evident. "Hey," she said softly, her voice lacking the usual bravado. "Hey." I didn't want to soften my stance, but I also didn't want to escalate the situation. I needed to keep it civil. "Thanks for meeting me," she continued, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "I know this is hard, but I want to make sure we do this amicably." "Right," I replied, trying not to let my resentment seep into my tone. "Let's just get through this." We spoke about dividing assets and figuring out living arrangements. I felt an unsettling mix of emotions as we navigated the logistics. Talking about money and property felt trivial compared to the emotional fallout, but I also recognized it was necessary. As the conversation progressed, Jess seemed to struggle to stay composed. I could see how difficult this was for her, but I had to remind myself that she had brought this on herself. At one point, Jess paused, her voice trembling. "Brad, I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. I was feeling lost and I made a huge mistake." I held my ground. "You say that, but you didn't just make one mistake, you made a choice. You chose to betray me, and that's something I can't overlook." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a moment I felt that familiar pang of sorrow. I remembered the good times we had shared, the laughs and love that once filled our home. But I squashed those thoughts. I couldn't allow myself to get lost in nostalgia. I had to remember the hurt. She paused. "I know I can't take back what I did, but I wish I could fix it," she said, her voice breaking. "You can't fix this, Jess. What's broken is broken." We finished the meeting with a tentative agreement on the logistics of our separation. I felt drained. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for a while, trying to process everything. I was still filled with anger, but beneath it all, there was a sense of closure. The subsequent days were filled with paperwork and legal discussions. I met with my lawyer several times to finalize everything, and I began to feel more empowered. I was taking control of my life. I even started to think about what I wanted for my future. I had spent so long working to provide for someone else, and now it was time to focus on what would make me happy. While I was sorting through my feelings, I met a group of guys at the gym who were going through their own struggles. They became a support system for me, sharing their stories and experiences. It was refreshing to connect with others who understood the pain of betrayal and heartbreak. We would grab drinks after workouts, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. It was during one of those nights out that I had a realization. I was finally starting to feel like myself again. Sure, I still had moments of sadness and anger, but I was learning to embrace my new reality and rediscover what made me happy. I had a long way to go, but the path ahead felt promising. Despite everything, I couldn't help but wish Jess had put in the same effort to communicate and connect with me before everything fell apart. I felt a profound sadness for the marriage we once had, but I knew it was time to let go and move forward. Life was waiting for me, and I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself getting deeper into my newfound routine. I was hitting the gym regularly, hanging out with my friends, and even exploring new hobbies. I began to rebuild my identity outside of my relationship with Jess, and it was refreshing. But every now and then, the shadow of my past would creep in. I'd see a couple holding hands or hear a song that reminded me of our happier times, and it would tug at my heartstrings. I had to remind myself that healing wasn't linear. Some days I'd feel invincible, while others I would feel the weight of sadness pressing down on me. I tried not to dwell on it, but it was all part of the process. I was coming to terms with the fact that I was grieving, not just for Jess, but for the life we had envisioned together. That future was gone, and I needed to accept that. One evening, while I was at home, I received a text from Jess. This time it was more desperate than pleading. "Can we please talk? I miss you and I'm really sorry for everything." I felt a rush of emotions flood through me, anger, confusion, and yes, even a small part of me wanted to see her. I knew it wasn't healthy, but part of me still cared for her. However, I had to remind myself of the reasons we were in this situation. I took a deep breath and decided to respond. "I think it's best if we don't talk right now. I'm trying to focus on moving forward." My phone buzzed almost immediately with her reply, this time tinged with urgency. "Please, Brad, I just want to explain myself better. I know I messed up, but I want to show you that I'm working on myself." For a moment, I hesitated. I had heard this before, and I didn't want to get swept back into the drama. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, and I knew I had to make the right choice for myself. After a long moment of deliberation, I texted back, "I need space, Jess. I hope you understand." That was the last conversation we had for a while. Jess seemed to step back, and I felt an odd sense of relief wash over me. It was clear that she was struggling with her choices, but I couldn't afford to get caught back in that web of manipulation. I needed to stay focused on myself. As time continued to pass, I got into the groove of life as a single man. I started dating again, though I was cautious. I went out with a few women, but it was more about getting to know myself than looking for anything serious. I wanted to take my time to explore what I liked and what I wanted in a partner. It felt liberating to rediscover that side of myself. One evening, I went out with some friends to a local bar. It was a laid-back atmosphere, and I was enjoying the company. As we mingled, I noticed a woman sitting alone at the bar, her laughter echoing in the crowd. There was something about her that drew me in. She had a warmth in her eyes that made me curious. After a few minutes of contemplation, I summoned the confidence to approach her. "Hey, I'm Brad. Mind if I join you?" She looked up and smiled, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Sure, I'm Lily. Nice to meet you." We struck up a conversation that flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything, our favorite movies, travel experiences, and even our career paths. She was funny, genuine, and had this infectious energy about her. It was refreshing to be around someone who made me laugh and feel at ease. As the night wore on, I felt a connection with her that I hadn't felt in a long time. I realized that I was genuinely enjoying myself and starting to let go of the past. The heaviness that had once wrapped around my heart was beginning to lift. When the evening came to an end, I asked for her number, hoping to see her again. Lily and I began dating casually, and I found myself looking forward to our time together. It was a welcome distraction from the chaos of my previous relationship. With her, I felt lighter. I didn't have to worry about the baggage that came with my past. With every date, I was reminded that there was still joy to be found in life. As weeks passed, I noticed a shift within myself. I was learning to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. I realized that I was worthy of love and happiness, regardless of what had happened before. I was no longer that heartbroken guy who had been betrayed. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger. But just when I thought I was moving on, Jess threw me a curveball. I received a call from my lawyer one afternoon, informing me that Jess had filed for a contested divorce. I felt my heart drop. I thought we had come to an agreement, but it turned out that she was now trying to fight me on the terms. I called her immediately, my chest tightening with anger. Jess, what the hell is going on? I thought we agreed on everything. Brad, I just want to make sure I'm protecting myself. I thought we could work through this together, but now I feel like you've moved on without me. Of course, I've moved on. You made your choice. I shouted, my voice trembling with frustration. I know, but it's hard for me to let go. I just want to make sure I'm not left with nothing, she replied, her voice cracking. I felt a mix of sympathy and anger. You have to be kidding me. You chose this path. I deserve to move forward without you dragging me back. The conversation ended with a threat of legal action, and I hung up feeling more frustrated than ever. It felt like Jess was trying to regain control of a situation that was already out of her hands. I realized I had to steel myself for what was to come. I had thought I was done with this chapter of my life, but it was far from over. I had to prepare for a fight, but this time I was going to do it on my terms. I wouldn't let her manipulation pull me back into the chaos. As I gathered my thoughts and prepared for the road ahead, I reminded myself that I had come so far. I was finally starting to reclaim my life. I wouldn't let Jess's last-ditch effort derail my progress. I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that I was stronger than I had ever been. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and emotional turmoil. I found myself thrown back into the very chaos I thought I had escaped. The contested divorce turned into a tug-of-war, and I had to brace myself for the battle ahead. Jess appeared to be trying to pull every tactic out of the book to make it difficult for me. It felt like she was in a panic mode, grasping at straws to regain some control over the situation. My lawyer prepared me for what was to come. Brad, be ready for her to fight dirty. Emotions are running high and she may try to twist the narrative, he warned. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had been healing, finally finding a sense of peace and identity again, and now I was faced with the daunting reality of a bitter divorce. I knew Jess was struggling, but I also recognized that this was her own doing. I had to remind myself of the reasons I chose to move on: betrayal, lies, and heartbreak. Those scars were still fresh, and I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. As the court dates approached, I focused on what I could control. I immersed myself in my work and spent time with Lily. She had been a bright spot in my life, and her support helped me keep my spirits up. She encouraged me to stay strong and grounded during this difficult time. One evening, as we were out for dinner, I shared my fears about the upcoming court proceedings. I just feel like I'm being dragged back into the mess. I thought I was finally moving on, and now this. Lily reached across the table, her eyes filled with warmth. You are moving on, Brad. This is just a temporary setback. You're a good person who deserves happiness, and you're going to get it. Just stay focused on your path. Her words resonated with me, and I took them to heart. I didn't want to let Jess's actions define my future. I was committed to rising above the chaos, no matter how hard she tried to pull me back down. On the day of the court hearing, I felt an overwhelming mixture of anxiety and determination. I dressed in a sharp suit, wanting to present myself as someone confident and in control. When I arrived at the courthouse, the weight of the situation settled heavily on my shoulders. I glanced around, taking in the solemn atmosphere and the other couples caught in similar struggles. When Jess walked in, my heart raced. She looked different, frazzled and worn. I suppose the stress was taking its toll on her, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered the hurt and betrayal that had led us here. The proceedings began, and we both presented our cases before the judge. Jess's arguments were filled with emotional pleas, and I could see her trying to play the victim. "I just want to make sure that I'm not left with nothing," she said, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "I've worked hard for everything we have," I countered, keeping my voice steady. "This is not just about emotions, this is about fairness. I gave my all to this marriage, and I deserve to move on without being dragged through the mud." The judge listened attentively, and I felt a flicker of hope. I could see that my lawyer was picking apart Jess's claims, presenting evidence and facts. I was reminded that this was a battle of wills, and I had to stand firm in my convictions. The tension in the room was palpable, and as the hearing dragged on, I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. Yet strangely, I also felt empowered. I was no longer the man who had been blindsided by betrayal. I was standing up for myself, and that was something I had to hold on to. At one point during the proceedings, Jess broke down. It was a surprising moment that took everyone aback. She began to cry, claiming that she felt crushed by what was happening. "I just wanted our marriage to work. I'm so lost," she sobbed. I watched her, conflicted. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy, but another part of me knew that this was just another attempt to manipulate the situation. I couldn't let her tears sway me. I had to stick to my guns. After what felt like an eternity, the judge called for a recess, allowing us time to regroup. I stepped outside, desperately needing some fresh air. I leaned against the wall, trying to gather my thoughts and prepare for whatever came next. It was a moment of clarity for me. I realized that I had spent so much time trying to make things work in our marriage, and now I had to focus on what was right for me. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge announced her decision. "Based on the evidence presented, I believe it is in the best interest of both parties to proceed with the terms discussed in the preceding meetings. Assets will be divided accordingly, and you are both encouraged to seek a peaceful resolution moving forward." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't the complete closure I had hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. Jess's face fell, and I could see the realization dawning on her that this was not going to end the way she had envisioned. I walked out of the courthouse feeling a mix of triumph and sadness. As I left, I received a message from Lily checking in on me. I could feel myself smiling as I read her words of encouragement. I knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but I also felt like I had regained control over my life. After the court proceedings, Jess sent me one last message, a mix of desperation and regret. "I hope one day you can forgive me. I never wanted to hurt you." I took a moment to think about my response. I was still angry, but I also recognized that holding onto that anger wouldn't help me move forward. I replied, "I need to focus on my future now. I hope you find peace as well." With that, I closed the door on that chapter of my life. It was time to embrace my new reality, and I was ready to move on. I had learned that I was resilient, capable of bouncing back from heartache. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And as I looked ahead, I knew that my future held endless possibilities, and I was excited to see where it would take me. As life began to settle into a new routine, I felt a sense of calm washing over me. The tumult of the divorce process had left its mark, but I was determined to focus on my healing. I spent more time with friends and continued to enjoy my time with Lily. Our connection deepened, and I felt a joy I hadn't experienced in ages. It was refreshing to be with someone who accepted me for who I was, scars and all. After the court proceedings, I learned to let go of the anger I had towards Jess. It wasn't easy, but I realized that holding onto that resentment would only weigh me down. I came to understand that she was fighting her own demons, And while I wouldn't excuse her behavior, I could choose to release myself from that burden. One night, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, reflecting on everything that had happened. I pulled out a notebook and started writing down my thoughts. It was an exercise I had picked up from therapy, and it helped me articulate the chaos swirling in my mind. I wrote about my feelings of betrayal, the myriad of emotions that accompanied the divorce, and the lessons I had learned throughout the process. As I wrote, I felt a sense of clarity. I was no longer defined by my past. Instead, I was standing on the precipice of a new beginning. I had spent so long trying to make things work with Jess, but now I was learning to prioritize myself and my happiness. I realized that I deserved love, respect, and a partner who would uplift me, not tear me down. Lily and I began discussing our future, and I felt a flutter of excitement at the prospect. We talked about traveling, exploring new places, and experiencing life together. I found myself dreaming again, something I hadn't done in a long time. I could envision a life filled with happiness, laughter, and shared adventures, and it felt liberating. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the coast. The salty air filled my lungs as we strolled along the beach hand in hand. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. In that moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I turned to Lily, realizing how far I had come since the dark days after my divorce. "Thank you for being here," I said, my voice soft. "I never thought I'd be able to feel this way again." She smiled, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "You deserve every bit of happiness, Brad. You fought hard to get to this point, and I'm so glad to be part of your journey." As we watched the waves crash against the shore, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was no longer that heartbroken man. I was someone who had learned to rise from the ashes. I had taken the lessons from my past and transformed them into a foundation for a brighter future. Over the next few months, I continued to grow and evolve. I poured myself into my work and my career flourished. I found fulfillment in my passions, whether it was through fitness, spending time with friends, or discovering new interests. I even picked up painting, something I had always wanted to try but never made time for. The act of creating helped me channel my emotions constructively, and I found joy in expressing myself through art. Eventually, Jess reached out one last time. It was a brief message, but it had a tone of sincerity. "I hope you're doing well, Brad. I want you to know that I'm working on myself too. I'm sorry for everything." I took a moment to process her words. While I still felt the sting of betrayal, I recognized that this message was an important step for both of us. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I sat with it, reflecting on how far I had come. I had no interest in reopening old wounds, but at the same time I felt a sense of closure. Finally, I decided to respond with something simple yet honest. "Thank you, Jess. I appreciate your message. I wish you well." With that, I closed the door on our past. I had made peace with what had happened, and I was determined to move forward without looking back. As I stood on the beach that day, watching the waves ebb and flow, I realized that I had come full circle. I had faced my demons, fought through the pain, and emerged stronger than I ever thought possible. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had shaped me into a better person. I learned that life is full of unexpected turns, and while it's important to cherish the moments of joy, it's equally vital to acknowledge the pain and the lessons it brings. I had risen from the ashes of my previous relationship, and now I was ready to embrace whatever came next with open arms. I took Lily's hand, and together we walked toward the horizon, ready to carve out our own path. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about all the possibilities that awaited us. The journey of healing was ongoing, but I knew that I had the strength to face it, all while moving forward with hope and love.